Hi, I'm Dr. Ford Brewer, and I want to talk to you today about a crisis for your health: metabolic dysfunction. Did you know that nearly 93% of adults over the age of 18 have some signs of metabolic dysfunction? Yet most don't even realize it. I truly believe that when it comes to failed health and chronic conditions, metabolic dysfunction is the root of all evil. That's why I created the Metabolic Risk Assessment, to help people catch metabolic dysfunction as soon as possible, because you can take this risk off the table. All of it. It's the number one cause of heart attack, stroke, dementia, Alzheimer's, blindness, kidney disease, even, and for men, even erectile dysfunction. And you can take that risk off the table. As a preventive medicine physician, I've dedicated my career to helping others avoid chronic diseases. I taught doctors back at Johns Hopkins when I was faculty, running the program in preventive medicine. It's the number one institution for preventive medicine in the world. And with all this education and my own active lifestyle and watching my diet, I still discovered I didn't understand metabolic disease at a deep enough level. It started at age 57. I had a CIMT. It measures the thickness of the carotid artery walls. You just look at the arteries, you see how thick they are, and it helps you assess plaque buildup. The results were alarming. My arterial age was equivalent to that of a 73-year-old man. This arterial age of 73 indicated significant plaque accumulation. That was a wake-up call for me. It was devastating emotionally, because I had to realize that slow death was creeping up. It revealed my health was not as optimal as I had believed as well. So, to uncover the root cause, I performed a test looking for the number one suspicion here, the number one suspect: prediabetes, metabolic health. So what I did was an oral glucose tolerance test. The findings showed that my blood sugar levels spiked over 160 milligrams per deciliter, for those of you who care. Over 160, indicating significant prediabetes, and enough to cause burning of the lining of my artery walls, even though I couldn't feel it. Cardiovascular inflammation, silently contributing to the development of plaque in my arteries. I was determined to reverse this condition, and I made significant lifestyle changes. Within a year, my average CIMT measurement decreased from 0.88 millimeters to less, steadily down to 0.67 millimeters, effectively reversing my arterial age from 73-year-old man to 52. And again, at that point in time, I was 57, 58. This demonstrated that reducing inflammation can lead to shrinkage of arterial plaque. This was when the light bulb came on for me. Since then, I've devoted my life to teaching millions of people on our YouTube channel and seeing patients from around the world in our telemedicine clinic about metabolic health. This became my passion. It was actually more than a passion. It became my purpose in life. Good metabolic health is the most critical factor in preventing disease and living a long, healthy life. So I want to start today by helping you understand what metabolism is, how it works, and why it's so important. Then I'll explain the first of its kind at-home metabolic health assessment and the tests I've included. This at-home test results from years of study, research, practical application, and, as I said, my own personal experience and going back to the drawing board. Now I'm on a mission. I want to reach millions of people with an easy, affordable, simple, and effective way to determine their level of risk, your level of risk, for metabolic disease. Let's start with a little information on metabolism. What is it? How does it work? So, when you look in a more broad sense, the food we eat is the source of our life and energy for living. Our bodies are made up of trillions of cells that rely on the food we eat to survive and function optimally. We have to break down food into sugars, fats, proteins, and micronutrients. And then these things get either driven into our cells for building blocks, or they get burnt for energy, or our body stores them for later use. Now, all of this is part of our metabolism. Metabolic dysfunction, on the other hand, is when your body has trouble using and storing energy properly from the food you eat. So it's an energy storage and use problem. Breaking food down into your cells just doesn't work the way it should, and the disease process begins. We begin storing fat. We get hungry, so we eat more because we can't burn our carbs, and pretty soon we can't burn fats either. Now, this results in most of the common chronic diseases. This metabolic disease causes the common chronic diseases that we deal with. Most importantly, if we can fix your metabolic dysfunction, you will likely have a healthy, vibrant life. And let me repeat this. 93% of adults over the age of 18 have some signs of this condition. They're not signs that you're going to notice unless you do the right stuff, like this evaluation. And 90% of us that have this problem have no clue. There are no physical signs. There are no symptoms. Let's talk about what goes wrong with our metabolism. Number one, too much sugar in the blood. Excess sugar in your blood happens when your body cannot process all the carbs you're eating. So these carbs stay in your bloodstream instead of going into your cells. You have a hormone called insulin that helps move those carbs, those sugars from your blood into your cells, and your cells have receptors for insulin. We call them insulin receptors. If they stop working correctly, they start getting resistant to insulin. This leads to high blood sugar and higher insulin and high blood pressure. That's what insulin resistance is. High blood sugar then leads to all kinds of health problems. Like I just mentioned, high blood pressure, the worst of which is growing insulin resistance, prediabetes, even diabetes. Because again, diabetes is the root of all chronic disease evils. It is the major cause for heart attack, stroke, blindness, kidney disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, and even erectile dysfunction. Number two, you get unhealthy fat levels. Food has different kinds of fats. Some are healthy, some are not so healthy. Our bodies cannot transport these fats independently because the fats would ball up. They would clump up and form clots, or what we call emboli in medicine, things floating around in our bloodstreams that can get lodged and stop our blood flow. So our body creates particles called lipoproteins. In other words, lipo means fat or oils, and proteins, you know what that means. So these are proteins that transport these fats by encircling them into small balls or particles. You don't need to remember the term lipoproteins. You don't even need to remember the concept here. But here's why we bring it up. You've probably heard of these things referred to as, quote, cholesterol. And you also have heard the labels, either, quote, bad cholesterol, LDL, low density lipoprotein, or, quote, good cholesterol, HDL, or high density lipoprotein. But the reality is, neither of those are really good nor bad. They are necessary for the body to do its work. The problem with LDL has more to do with other types of fats called triglycerides. They are our body fats. You see them in a simple cholesterol test. They're a way for our body to store inflammatory fat at high levels. Now, high levels of HDL cholesterol usually indicate a better metabolism. So that's why you start to hear these old terms about good and bad cholesterol. It's really talking more about the amount of triglyceride in that cholesterol particle. Now, in people with metabolic dysfunction, triglyceride tends to build up and HDL tends to decrease. Believe it or not, these are both related more to your carbohydrate metabolism than they are to any kind of cholesterol. Cholesterol just happens to be transported by our body in some of the same particles. That's how this whole misdirection got started. So let's talk about something else here. Number 3, extra fat around organs. People tend to think that we get fat because we overeat. But that's not what really happens. Let's go back and talk about what really happens. And it's a little bit nuanced or a little bit, maybe a little bit confusing, but just hang on and you can get it. We tend to overeat because we can't use the energy that we're getting from our food. Now that's simple. This drives us to eat more because we're just not getting a lot to eat. At least our body's telling us that because it cannot access that energy. Since we're eating more, we're getting extra energy, which again we can't use because of metabolic disease. What do we do with it? We store that extra energy. This further worsens our metabolic dysfunction. This fat can build up in places that it shouldn't, like your liver, in your muscles, around your belly. And it causes more and more problems. As you start building up fat, you produce hormones that increase insulin resistance, which leads to a vicious spiral. Increasing inflammation causes increasing inability to get the energy out of the food that we eat. We can't get that energy out of the food we eat. Our body feels hungry. We eat more. We store that extra energy. That extra energy, when it's stored, creates these enzymes, these hormones, like resistin. And guess what resistin does? It creates insulin resistance. Now, inflammation is the leading cause of most of these chronic diseases. When we are exposed to frequent episodes of high blood sugar, for example, you eat a lot of Doritos or you eat breakfast cereals like Cheerios, your body stays in a state of low-level inflammation. That damages tissues over time. It increases your insulin resistance. Your insulin receptors begin to get resistant to getting all that sugar time and time again. The biology geeks would call that downregulated. Our insulin sensitivity becomes downregulated because we're getting hit with so many sugars. Our immune system is weak. It doesn't respond properly when we're exposed to things like viruses or bacteria or other invaders. Our immune system starts to attack our own body. And it's not just our body, it's attacking that plaque. It's attacking that lining of our artery wall. That's what happens. We get some problems with autoimmune diseases such as lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. Those are also major causes of cardiovascular inflammation. With chronic inflammation, we lose the ability to find and kill cancer cells. When we have inflammation in our arteries, it leads to damage in the arteries and plaque formation. This happens because of the effect that sugar in the blood can have in the lining of our arteries. And as I mentioned earlier, there are a few types of inflammatory diseases that do this too, like rheumatoid arthritis and psoriatic arthritis. You don't need to remember those terms. Some of you that have these diseases may need to know this, though. This basically means that excess sugar burns our arteries. Also, excess insulin does as well. When our arteries are damaged, so are our organs, because the artery is literally the lifeblood of that organ. Whether you're talking about brain, your eye, your heart, kidneys, or erectile mechanisms. Number 5, let's talk about arterial damage for a minute. Each organ in your body depends on your arteries having the ability to bring oxygen and nutrients to that organ and to take toxins away from that organ or waste materials away from that organ. It's bringing oxygen, taking away carbon dioxide, bringing proteins and fats and carbs and building blocks, and taking away, again, waste materials. When there is damage to our arteries due to inflammation and insulin resistance, we lose these abilities and start to accumulate toxins in our organs. When this happens in your eyes, it leads to blindness and cataracts. When this happens in your kidneys, it leads to kidney failure and even kidney transplants or dialysis. When this happens to our heart, it leads to a heart attack. When it happens to our brain, it leads to a stroke, after which we can lose the ability to talk, take care of ourselves, move around. Ultimately, it can kill us. But again, here's the opportunity. I don't mean to be negative here. I just want us to be aware that we can take the risk for all of these terrible things off the table. That's the opportunity. Now, here's the gap in traditional testing. You might be wondering, if this is such a big deal, why are so many cases of this problem going undiagnosed? 3/4 of primary care doctors are not trained and don't understand how to diagnose metabolic disease. If they can't diagnose it, they certainly can't treat it. And again, this is not me saying this. This is not me criticizing other doctors. I'm a doc. I've made a living out of hiring and supervising and training docs. Docs just don't get it. Traditional docs just rely too much on fasting glucose and A1C. Those are the only measures that they tend to use. If you don't believe me, ask your doc. These only measure part of the problem. They're like looking at a single page in a book and trying to understand the whole story, like looking at a still shot out of a movie and trying to understand the rest of the movie. Once these markers are elevated, a lot of damage has already been done. Depending on how late it is that you pick it up, the damage can be irreversible. Real warning signs often go ignored by our doctors because the tests that they ask for come back, quote, normal, end quote, leaving people vulnerable to serious conditions that we've already discussed. Let's talk about the specific factors that we will test and measure. Number 1, family history. We're going to ask you a series of questions about your family history. Your genetics passed down from your family play a huge role in your risk for metabolic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. If close family members have metabolic problems, you're going to have a higher risk due to inherited traits that affect how your body processes carbs, sugars, fats, and energy. Knowing your family history can help you take steps earlier, like focusing on diet and exercise to reduce your risk. Number 2, personal history. You remember we talked about epigenetics and how your lifestyle can actually change the way your body uses your genetics. You'll complete a series of questions on your personal health history, your own medical history like past illnesses, conditions, symptoms. All this provides clues about your current and future metabolic health. We ask you these questions from a metabolic perspective. Conditions like prediabetes, high blood pressure, or obesity, or just weight gain in the past can signal underlying metabolic dysfunction. Number 3, lifestyle. The next set of questions in your assessment will be about your lifestyle. Remember again that discussion about epigenetics. Understanding your health journey helps in identifying patterns and risk factors. You can address these through lifestyle or medical interventions. We'll ask you a few questions about your nutrition, your physical activity levels, your sleep, stress levels, and your exposure to toxins like tobacco. This section of the assessment is extremely important. It will allow us to identify where you are on your journey to health, what challenges and adjustments need to be made, what your major risk factors are, and what the things are that you already have going in the right direction. Just so you know, I've never met anybody whose lifestyle was absolutely perfect, and I've really never met anybody whose lifestyle was absolutely wrong. We're all on a spectrum here. Number 4, body mass index and body fat percentage. Now, while body mass index can be an important marker for metabolic health, it's not reliable just by itself. Some people have skewed results. You know, the Arnold Schwarzenegger type build. You've got all these big muscles. Your BMI goes up, but it's healthy muscle, not unhealthy fat. So some people might have a, quote, normal BMI while having a low muscle mass and high body fat percentage. Both of these are risk factors for metabolic dysfunction, and that's one of the critical things that we want to help you discover. Your kit will have body fat calipers and a tape measure that will allow us to estimate the proportion of body fat in your body, which directly impacts metabolism in a big, big way. I want to see if you have a high body fat percentage, especially around the belly, visceral fat. This is linked to insulin resistance and inflammation. Low muscle mass can slow down that metabolism. It reduces insulin sensitivity. It creates cardiovascular inflammation. Low muscle mass means you've lost your most important internal safety valve against metabolic disease. Metabolically active muscle is your body's natural safety valve. So, number 1, improving body composition through exercise and a balanced diet helps boost metabolic health and prevent diseases. So, back to things that we're looking at, things that we're testing for. Number 5, OGTT, oral glucose tolerance test. Here's why understanding your glucose issues matters. This test measures how your body handles sugar over time, providing insight into insulin sensitivity and blood sugar regulation. Now, if you're saying, okay, my doctor's already tested this, your doctor has probably used either A1C or fasting glucose. The American Diabetes Association, even those guys have admitted these two tests miss more of this problem than they pick up. So this OGTT is one of the main tests that I just wish doctors would give their patients. In this test, you'll measure your blood glucose with a simple finger stick before and after drinking a liquid with 75 grams of glucose. Unlike many of the national labs, for this test, we use organic, preservative-free, and dye-free versions of this glucose drink. It tastes pretty good if you can get past the sugar. After you drink the mix, we'll ask you to measure your blood sugar a few more times. With these different numbers, we're able to see clearly how your body metabolizes sugar. And if you're thinking and you've heard the academics say, oh, you know what? You don't have to worry about that. Just do HOMA-IR. Let me tell you, we have patients come to see us every day who have a perfect HOMA-IR, a perfect A1C, a perfect fasting glucose, and their blood sugar peaks way over 200. Those other tests, including HOMA-IR for those academic types, they don't work. High blood sugar levels during this test indicates insulin resistance or prediabetes. These are early signs of metabolic dysfunction. Even low blood sugar during this test can be a very early sign. We used to call it reactive hypoglycemia. You may have heard of it. If results are abnormal, you can take steps like eating a low carb diet, exercising, monitoring blood sugar levels, getting good sleep. Now, another component of this evaluation system, number 6, the grip strength. Grip strength is a simple measure for overall muscle strength. It's an indicator, and it's linked to metabolic health. Now, in your test kit, you'll have a dynamometer. That's one of those things you squeeze, and it measures how much pressure you can squeeze with. Low grip strength is associated with poor muscle mass and a higher risk of conditions like insulin resistance, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. A healthy grip strength is a great bioindicator for healthy aging and metabolic health. Now, if you're saying, but those are just muscles in the hand, here's the thing. Independent research has been done on grip strength and just aging by researchers who knew nothing about metabolic disease. And they still saw really good correlations between grip strength and healthy aging. Why is that? You know, even if you don't work out, even if you don't run, even if you don't do squats and things like that, most people do use their hands. And as we age, we start to lose that, as we said before, we start to lose the functioning of our hormones, which help us with our muscles. That's one of the reasons why grip strength is one of the most important indicators of good metabolic function and aging, and the ability to retain muscle, whether you're working out or not. Stronger muscles improve how your body uses glucose and burns fat. Strength training and physical activity improve grip strength, muscle health, and metabolism. Number 7, another test we use is heart rate recovery. In this test, we'll guide you through a brief exercise test to measure how quickly your heart rate returns to normal after you exercise. So we'll get a basal heart rate, we'll get you exercising to really increase that rate, then we'll let you rest again, and then we'll measure that heart rate again. This is a great indicator of cardiovascular health, fitness, and overall health. A slow recovery rate signals poor cardiovascular conditioning, cardiovascular health, high stress levels, or even some autonomic nervous system imbalance. What does that mean? Again, problems with your adrenals, your cortisol, and or your vagus nerve. Well, that's not that common. Just worry mostly about cardiovascular health. If you have a slow recovery, start thinking about cardiovascular health. All of these things are linked to metabolic dysfunction or metabolic health. A faster recovery is a sign of a healthy, well-functioning heart and metabolism. Regular and appropriate exercise can improve heart rate recovery and overall metabolic health. Number 8, results and recommendations. Now, let's talk about the report and the consultation you'll receive to go over your results. After we gather all of this information from you, you'll be seen by one of my health coaches to go over your metabolic risk assessment so that you can find out where you stand and not remain in the dark anymore about your degree of metabolic health or dysfunction. You'll receive a report that looks like this. There'll be 8 sections to go over, including a summary of your metabolic risk level, and then going a bit deeper into family history, lifestyle, your BMI, body fat percentage, your oral glucose tolerance test, the grip strength test, and your heart rate recovery test results. All of that Those 7 things, the summary, the and the 6 tests, will be followed by recommendations that we have for you based on your results. We'll have multiple options at various cost points for you depending on where you land in the metabolic health spectrum and what your risk factors are to help you solve your problems.